There is a boy who walks the beach at night. His name is Eli. He is 12 years old, slight and quiet, with dark eyes that notice things other people don't. The way the sand changes color at the waterline, the way the clouds move differently above the ocean than they do above the land, the way the stars reflect on a calm sea so perfectly that on the clearest nights it becomes difficult to tell where the water ends and the sky begins. He lives in a small coastal town where everyone knows everyone, and he has lived there his whole life, and somehow, despite this, he has always felt like a visitor. Not unwelcome, just not quite belonging, like a book that had been placed on the wrong shelf. Still a perfectly good book, just in the wrong place. He was quiet at school in the way that some children are quiet, not because he had nothing to say, but because the things he wanted to say didn't seem to fit neatly into the conversations around him. While other kids talked about games and grades and weekend plans, Eli thought about the ocean, about what was in it, about how much of it no one had ever seen, about how it had been there long before any of them and would be there long after, going about its enormous, indifferent business, caring nothing for the small and temporary lives that gathered at its edges. His mother worried about him in the gentle way that good mothers worry about quiet children. His teachers noted on his reports that he was thoughtful and attentive, but could do more to engage with his peers. His peers, for their part, were neither cruel nor particularly kind. They simply existed in a world that Eli observed from a slight and comfortable distance, like a shorebird watching the waves from a rock. The one place he never felt like a visitor was the beach, and so he went there most nights after the town went to sleep. He would pull on his jacket and his worn canvas shoes and walk the half-mile from his house to the shore and stand at the water's edge and breathe. And the particular tightness that lived in his chest during the day, that low, constant sense of being slightly out of place in the world, would ease. The ocean, at least, never made him feel strange. He first saw the glow when he was 8 years old. He had been walking along the high tide line on a clear October night, kicking at shells, when he stopped and looked at the water and noticed that something was different. The waves were lit from within. Not by moonlight. He knew moonlight. He had watched it on the water hundreds of times, and this was not the same thing. Moonlight sits on the surface of the water, moving with it, a borrowed brightness. This came from below, soft and blue and steady, like the light from a lamp seen through frosted glass, pulsing very gently, alive. He stood and watched it for a long time. When he went home and told his mother, she smiled and said it was probably bioluminescence, tiny glowing creatures in the water, a natural phenomenon, nothing to worry about. She had read about it. It happened in some places. He said it didn't look like that. She said she was sure it was. He said it was different. It was moving in a direction, like it was going somewhere. She tucked him in and kissed his forehead and turned off the light. He told his teacher the following week. His teacher said yes, bioluminescence was a fascinating subject, and gave him a book about ocean biology, which he read cover to cover, and which was interesting, but which did not contain what he had seen, because what he had seen was not bioluminescence. He knew the difference now. He had read the book. He told 2 boys from his class. They laughed, not cruelly, just with the easy dismissiveness of children who have not yet learned that the world is stranger than they have been told. After that, he stopped telling people, but he kept watching, and the glow kept coming. Not every night, not even most nights, but reliably, consistently. On the nights when the moon was fullest, and the water was calmest, and the beach was completely empty of everyone except Eli, it was there. Always beginning exactly at midnight, always fading exactly when the first gray light of morning appeared on the horizon, always moving, always heading in the same direction, out toward open water, following a path that curved gently to the southwest like a river current made of light. For 4 years he watched it from the shore. He was never afraid of it. That was perhaps the most telling thing, the thing that, if anyone had been paying close enough attention, might have told them something important about what the glow actually was. Because Eli was not a reckless child. He was careful and thoughtful, and he considered things from multiple angles before acting. And he had considered this glow from every angle he could find, and in none of those angles did it feel dangerous. It felt like the opposite of dangerous. It felt like the feeling he got when he came home after a long and difficult day, and the house was warm, and something good was cooking, and his mother's voice came from the kitchen asking how he was. It felt like welcome. On the night of his 12th birthday, a Friday in late July with a full moon so bright it cast shadows, Eli made a decision. He went to the old wooden dock at the south end of the beach where 3 rowboats were kept for the use of the town's fishermen. He had rowed before. His neighbor, Mr. Calloway, had taught him 2 summers ago, out on the shallow bay, and he was good at it, better than most adults expected a 12-year-old to be, with an easy, patient rhythm that Mr. Calloway said came from paying attention rather than from strength. He pushed one of the smaller boats into the water. He set a life jacket in the bottom. He set a waterproof flashlight in the bottom. He set a small bag with water and a granola bar in the bottom, because he had been raised to be practical even when doing impractical things. He climbed in. He waited. At exactly midnight, the glow appeared. It began, as it always did, close to shore, a soft bloom of blue light just beneath the surface, spreading outward from the shallows like watercolor dropped into still water. Then the movement started. The current of light pulling gently to the southwest, drawing its slow and luminous line across the dark ocean surface. Eli set his oars, took one breath, and followed it. He rowed for a long time. The town disappeared behind him. The lights on the shore grew small, and then were just a faint warm suggestion on the horizon, the way distant cities look from airplanes at night. Ahead and all around there was nothing but ocean and moonlight, and the path of blue glowing softly in the water ahead of his bow, steady and unhurried, as if it had all the time in the world and had been expecting him to follow it for years. He was not afraid. He was something else, something for which he didn't have a perfect word. Alert and calm at the same time, present in a way he almost never felt during the day. Every stroke of the oars felt important and right, and the water was gentle beneath the hull, and the air smelled of salt and something else, something sweeter, something he had never smelled before and could not name, that seemed to grow stronger the further out he went. He rowed for what he estimated was 2 hours, perhaps 3. He didn't check his watch. It didn't seem to matter. And then the glow changed. It stopped moving forward. It spread outward instead, slowly, in a perfect circle around the boat, 10 meters across, then 20, then 50, until the entire surface of the ocean around him was lit from below in soft, pulsing blue. The boat sat at the center of it like a small wooden island in a sea of light. Eli shipped his oars. He leaned over the side and looked down into the water, and there, beneath him, not far beneath, close enough that in the glow he could see it clearly, close enough that he could make out details, shapes, colors, was a city. It was not like any city he had imagined. He had expected, in some distant part of his mind, something cold and strange and alien, the kind of underwater world you see in science fiction, all metal and bubble domes and blinking machinery. But this was nothing like that. It was warm. That was the first word that came to him. Even from the surface, even through 20 feet of water, it felt warm. The buildings were made of something that looked like pale stone, rounded and smooth, grown over with living coral in colors he had no names for. A deep violet, a gold so rich it was nearly orange, a green so saturated it was almost audible. Between the buildings, streets curved and wandered the way old towns do, following the natural lay of the land rather than a planner's grid. And along those streets, soft lights glowed from windows and doorways, gentle and constant, the same blue as the path he had followed to get here. Gardens grew between the buildings, actual gardens, or something like gardens, with tall swaying plants and small rounded shapes that might have been flowers, lit from below so that they glowed like paper lanterns. Great archways spanned the wider streets, covered in something that moved with the current, and the movement was so easy and so rhythmic that it felt less like water and more like breath. And there were people, or something like people. They moved through the city the way people move through a place they have always lived and loved, unhurried, purposeful, at ease. They were tall, taller than any person Eli had ever seen, and their forms were both familiar and different in ways that took him a moment to resolve. 2 arms, 2 legs, upright. But their skin held the same soft blue light as the city around them, and their movements had a quality of the water in them, a fluid continuity from one gesture to the next, as if the boundary between their bodies and the ocean was slightly less definite than the boundary between Eli's body and the air. As he watched, one of them looked up, directly at him. Through 20 feet of water, across the impossible distance between the world above and the world below, they looked at each other, and the figure smiled. The water around the boat shifted, not violently, gently, the way a current changes direction, and the boat began, very slowly, to descend. Not sink, descend. There was a difference, though Eli would have struggled to explain it. The boat did not take on water, did not list, did not give any sign of distress. It simply moved downward, smoothly and slowly, the way an elevator moves, with Eli sitting in it, holding the sides and breathing, and the surface above him receding, and the city below rising to meet him. The moment the hull of the boat came to rest on the soft sand of the city's main square, Eli realized he could breathe. The air, if it was air, was different, lighter somehow, fresher than anything he had ever breathed on the surface, the way water from a spring is different from water from a tap. He sat in the boat for a moment, breathing it, feeling it fill his lungs completely, feeling the sweetness of it that he had smelled on the surface, now all around him. And he understood that whatever this place was, it had made room for him to exist in it. He climbed out of the boat. The sand was fine and white and cool beneath his shoes. The city rose around him on all sides, its warm stone and glowing coral and soft lights, its curved streets extending away in 3 directions. And standing before him, arranged in a loose and welcoming semicircle, were 7 of the tall, luminous figures he had seen from above. The one in the center, the one who had looked up and smiled, stepped forward. She was older, or she seemed older, with a quality of deep patience in her face that reminded Eli of the ocean itself. She was taller than him by nearly a full head, and the light in her skin moved like the light in the water, shifting and soft, and her eyes were the dark, clear color of deep water on a calm day. She placed one hand over her chest, in a gesture that Eli understood without translation, because some gestures are older than language and mean the same thing in every world. Welcome. We have been waiting for you. You are home. He spent the whole night in the city. He was given a guide, a young figure, roughly his own size, who he understood to be close to his own age by something in the way they moved and looked at things, with that particular quality of someone who is still discovering how large the world is. Welcome. We have been waiting for you. You are home. He spent the whole night in the city. He was given a guide, a young figure, roughly his own size, who he understood to be close to his own age by something in the way they moved and looked at things, with that particular quality of someone who is still discovering how large the world is. They communicated partly in words and partly in something else, something that Eli could only describe later as a kind of clear knowing, not hearing thoughts, but understanding meanings the way you understand the feeling of a piece of music, even if you don't know its title or its language. His guide took him first to the gardens. Up close, the plants were extraordinary, some of them tall and feathery, moving in the slow current like the most patient dancers imaginable. Some were low and dense, the flower-like shapes he had seen from above, glowing softly in golds and... They walked through the market quarter next, where the streets widened and the buildings opened up into low arched stalls, and the ocean people moved through in the same unhurried way, exchanging things that Eli couldn't fully identify, objects that seemed to hold light inside them, woven things that moved even when the current didn't. Food, he thought, though what it was made of he couldn't tell. His guide gave him something small and round and smooth to eat, and he hesitated for only a moment before he ate it, and it tasted like the sweetness in the air, like something clean and deep and good, like something his body had always known it needed and had never found on the surface. He was brought to the great library next, because of course there was a library, because every city worth calling a city has one, and this one was enormous, a circular building that rose 4 or 5 stories, its walls lined floor to ceiling with objects that held records the way books hold records, though they were not books. They were smooth, flat stones, each one glowing faintly, each one containing what his guide communicated to him was a story, or a memory, or both. There were thousands of them. There were perhaps hundreds of thousands of them. The history of a civilization so long that even its own librarians could not read all of it in a single lifetime. His guide pulled one stone from a low shelf and held it out to him. When Eli touched it, something moved through his fingers. Not pain, not electricity, something warmer than either. There were thousands of them. There were perhaps hundreds of thousands of them. The history of a civilization so long that even its own librarians could not read all of it in a single lifetime. His guide pulled one stone from a low shelf and held it out to him. When Eli touched it, something moved through his fingers. Not pain, not electricity, something warmer than either. A feeling of enormous time. A feeling of countless nights. A feeling unmistakable and overwhelming of being known. Of being seen from a very great distance for a very long time. He stood in the library holding the stone until his guide gently took it back. They visited the music hall, where the sound was unlike any music Eli had heard. It moved through the water the way light moves, omnidirectional, surrounding him completely, and it was so beautiful that he stood in the entrance and could not make himself walk inside, because he was afraid that if he got any closer to something that beautiful, it might break. His guide stood beside him, and they listened from the doorway, and that was enough. They climbed to the highest point in the city, a tower of pale stone at its center, rising above everything, and from its top, Eli could see the whole of it spread out below him in the midnight dark of the deep ocean. The soft lights in the windows, the swaying gardens, the curved streets where the city's people moved in their easy, luminous way through the life they had built in this impossible, beautiful place. And beyond the city's edge, the open ocean, dark and enormous and full of things not yet found, stretching away in every direction to distances that the mind could not really hold. He stayed up there for a long time. Near the end of the night, the elder, the one who had welcomed him in the square, came to find him. She found him sitting on the steps of the tower, looking at the city. She sat beside him, which surprised him, and they were quiet together for a moment, the way you can only be quiet with someone when the quiet itself is a form of conversation. Then she communicated to him in that clear way that was not exactly words, and was not exactly not words, what she wanted him to know. The glow had not been an accident. It had not been random or impersonal or indifferent. The ocean had been watching him for a long time, since long before he was born, in fact, which was a piece of information that landed in him with a quiet weight that would take years to fully understand. The city chose who it revealed itself to. It did not choose based on bravery or cleverness or any quality that the world above seemed to value most highly. It chose based on something rarer and harder to name, something like the ability to notice, something like the willingness to feel at home in what cannot be explained. Something like the particular kind of loneliness that comes not from being unloved, but from being in the wrong place, and the particular kind of patience required to keep looking for the right one. It had chosen Eli. Not tonight. Tonight was simply when it had finally decided to let him know. The city was his, she communicated. Not to possess, not to take anything from, but his to return to whenever the moon was full and the tide was calm and the midnight hour came and went. The door would always be open for him. The path would always be lit. Whatever happened in the world above, whatever years brought, whatever changes came, whatever the long and complicated journey of a human life turned out to hold, the glow would be there. The city would be there. He would always have somewhere to go. He would always belong somewhere. He looked at her for a long moment. He thought about his quiet house, his gentle mother, his school and his classmates, and the long, ordinary days that made up a life on the surface. He thought about how none of those things were bad, not really, how they were in fact mostly good, how the world above was full of beauty and warmth, how it had simply never quite felt like it was entirely his, in the way that this place, in the space of a single night, already did. He thought about how now it could be both. He nodded. She placed her hand over her chest again, the same gesture as before. He placed his hand over his own chest and mirrored it back. The light began to change. Slowly at first, a shift in the quality of the glow, a subtle warming, the deep midnight blue beginning to soften towards something lighter. His guide appeared at his side and touched his arm gently, and the gesture needed no translation. "It is almost morning. You have to go back." He walked back through the city one last time. Through the garden, where the glowing plants were beginning, very slowly to dim, the way candles dim when a draught reaches them. Through the market quarter, which was quieter now, the stalls closing, the people moving toward their homes with the ease of those who have done this every morning of their lives. Past the library, past the music hall, where the sound was softer now, a lullaby winding itself down. Back to the central square, where his boat sat exactly where he had left it, on the white sand, waiting. The people of the city had gathered in the square. Not all of them, it was a large city, but many, dozens at least. They stood in the same loose semicircle as when he had arrived, and as he walked toward the boat, they inclined their heads toward him, one by one, in a gesture he recognized as something more than a farewell. An acknowledgment, a recognition, an answer, finally, to the years of quiet wondering, the years of standing on the shore watching the glow and not being believed, the years of feeling like a visitor in his own life. He climbed into the boat. The water lifted him. Gently, as it had lowered him, it raised him back toward the surface. And he sat in the hull and watched the city recede below him. The warm stone and the coral gardens and the soft-lit windows and the tall, luminous figures in the square becoming smaller and then smaller still. And then the surface was above him, and then he was through it, and the cold salt air hit his face, and it was dark, and the ocean was wide around him, and the sky to the east held the very first suggestion of gray. The glow beneath him faded. Slowly, the way music fades when the last note has been played and the silence comes back in. The blue light dimming and softening and thinning until there was nothing below him but dark water, the same water it always was in the daylight hours, ordinary and enormous and keeping its secret with perfect patience. Eli took up his oars. He rowed back toward shore. The sky lightened as he rowed, gray to silver to the first faint rose of dawn, spreading from the east across the water in front of him, and by the time the hull of the boat scraped the sand of the shallows and he stepped out into ankle-deep water and pulled it up the beach, the sun was just appearing above the horizon, orange and enormous, the same sun it always was. He stood on the beach in the early morning light, shoes wet, hands roughened from the oars, and he looked out at the ocean. The ocean looked back at him the way it always did, vast and calm and giving nothing away. But he knew now what it held, He knew the warmth of it, and the beauty of it, and the strange, sweet air of it, and the library, and the gardens, and the music that was too beautiful to walk toward, and the elder who had looked at him like someone finally handing a lost letter to the person it was always addressed to. He breathed the morning air. He felt the tightness in his chest, that low, constant visitor feeling, that sense of being slightly out of place in the world. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, it was not there. Not because the world above had changed, not because he had changed, but because he knew now what he had always suspected and never been able to prove, that belonging is not something the world above grants you if you are patient enough or normal enough or loud enough. It is something that already exists somewhere, shaped exactly like you, and if you are very quiet and very patient and willing to follow a light through the dark for as long as it takes, you will find it. He still walks the beach at night. He still goes on the nights when the moon is full and the water is calm, and he still arrives at midnight, and the glow still comes, and the path still stretches out across the water to the southwest, soft and blue and steady. He still rows out to meet it. He has never told another person. Not because he is ashamed of it, and not because he thinks they wouldn't believe him, though he knows they wouldn't, because he was 12 years old and he knew, and no one believed him then. He doesn't tell anyone because some things are not diminished by being kept. Some things are not improved by being explained. Some things belong to the person they chose, and to the place that chose them, and the space between, and that is enough. The city is always there. The elder always greets him in the square. His guide, taller now, as he is taller now, always takes him through the gardens first. And every morning, when the light comes and the glow fades, and he rows back to shore alone in the gray dawn, he pulls the boat up on the sand and stands at the water's edge and breathes, and the ocean is quiet around him, and the tightness is gone, and he knows, as surely as he knows anything, that he is not a visitor here. He is not a visitor anywhere. He belongs to the surface world and to the deep one, to the morning light and the midnight glow, to the ordinary and the extraordinary both, and the ocean holds him in it the way it holds everything it loves, completely and without end. And as the glowing tides faded with the morning light, and the world above woke slowly to another ordinary day, the ocean remembered him, as it had always remembered him, as it always would. He could not stay, but he could always return. The city would always be there, and he would never again wonder where home was.